My name is Marcus. I'm 28 years old, and I need to tell you about my brother Kyle and how I finally managed to break a pattern that had been destroying my career for nearly a decade. It's not a story I'm proud of, but it's mine to tell. Kyle is 2 years younger than me, and he's always been the family's star performer. While I was the hard-working one, the dedicated student who spent nights studying for certifications and building my resume, he was the naturally gifted one, the charming networker who could walk into any room and immediately become everyone's favorite person. Our parents made this dynamic clear through constant comparisons throughout our childhood. "Why can't you be more personable like Kyle?" they'd ask when I struggled to make friends. "Your brother has such a natural way with people, Marcus. You should learn from him." The favoritism wasn't subtle. When Kyle brought home C+ grades, our parents celebrated his improvement and took him out for dinner. When I brought home A grades, they asked why I couldn't achieve straight A's like my friend Jennifer. When Kyle made the junior varsity basketball team, they bought season tickets and attended every game. When I made the debate team and won regional competitions, they were usually too busy with Kyle's activities to attend my tournaments. This pattern established early that Kyle's achievements, no matter how modest, were celebrated, while mine, no matter how significant, were treated as expected baseline performance. Kyle learned that charm and charisma could compensate for lack of effort, while I learned that hard work and excellence weren't enough to earn recognition or approval. The professional sabotage started when I was 22, fresh out of college with a business degree. I had landed what I thought was my dream internship at a marketing firm in Denver. I'd spent months preparing for the interview, researching the company, networking with employees on LinkedIn. The position was mine, or so I thought. Kyle was still finishing his communications degree at the time, but he had always shown interest in my career moves. During a family dinner where I excitedly talked about starting my internship, he asked seemingly innocent questions about the company culture, the hiring manager's background, what kinds of projects they handled. I was so excited about finally having a professional opportunity that I shared everything. I talked about how the company was expanding into social media marketing, how they were looking for fresh perspectives on digital campaigns, how the hiring manager had mentioned they valued creativity and innovative thinking. I even shared specific details about the projects I would be working on and the clients I'd be supporting. 2 weeks into my internship, Kyle showed up at the office. He told the receptionist he was my brother and that he was interested in learning about career opportunities at the company. Within an hour, he had charmed the entire team with his easy smile and natural charisma. He asked thoughtful questions about their current campaigns, shared ideas about social media strategies that I had mentioned to him at home, and somehow managed to get a meeting with the department head that same day. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Kyle had done his homework, researching not just the company, but the specific clients and projects I had told him about. He presented himself as someone with fresh ideas and a natural understanding of their business needs. By the end of the meeting, Kyle had not only secured an internship for himself, but had been offered the full-time position that I was working toward. The position I had spent 2 years preparing for, that I had assumed would naturally transition from my internship performance. When I confronted the hiring manager about what had happened, his response was devastating. "Your brother just has something special, Marcus. He's a natural leader with fresh ideas. We think he'll be a better fit for our company culture going forward." My internship was quietly terminated 2 weeks later with vague feedback about not quite being the right match for their team dynamics. Kyle, meanwhile, was given my desk, my projects, and my future. He started full-time immediately, skipping the internship phase entirely. Kyle thrived in the role. He graduated a semester early and moved directly into the full-time position that should have been mine. When I confronted him about what he'd done, his response was casual, almost dismissive. "I didn't steal anything from you, Marcus. They chose the better candidate. Maybe you should ask yourself why you can't close the deal when it matters." That was just the beginning of what would become a systematic pattern of career sabotage that would define the next 5 years of my professional life. At 23, I spent 6 months preparing for a position at a tech startup in Boulder. This time, I was determined to be more careful. I had taught myself 3 different coding languages, built an impressive portfolio of projects, and had navigated through 3 successful interview rounds. The final interview was scheduled for a Friday, and based on my conversations with the team, I was confident the job was mine. The position was perfect for me, a hybrid role that combined my business background with the technical skills I had developed. They were looking for someone who could bridge the gap between their development team and their business strategy, exactly the kind of cross-functional role I had been working toward. On Thursday night during a family barbecue, I was so excited about my upcoming final interview that I couldn't help sharing the news. I told everyone about the company's innovative approach to fintech, their plans for expansion, and how this role would position me perfectly for future growth in the tech industry. Kyle congratulated me warmly, asked about the company's growth plans and what programming languages they used. He seemed genuinely interested in my success, asking thoughtful questions about the specific technologies they were implementing and the challenges they were facing in their market. I was so excited that I shared everything: the interviewer's background, the specific projects they were working on, even the casual conversation topics that had come up during my previous interviews. I told him about how the CTO had mentioned their struggles with user acquisition, how the CEO was passionate about financial inclusion, and how they were specifically looking for someone who could help them scale their operations. On Friday morning, I arrived at the tech company for my final interview, only to be told there had been a scheduling conflict. My interview was postponed until the following Tuesday. The receptionist seemed confused about the change, mentioning that there had been some last-minute adjustments to the schedule that she wasn't fully informed about. When Tuesday came, I sat in the lobby for 20 minutes before being informed that the position had been filled. The hiring manager who came out to deliver the news looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact and speaking quickly as if he wanted to end the conversation as soon as possible. Later, through a mutual connection who worked at the company, I learned what had really happened. Kyle had contacted the company directly on Friday afternoon, just hours after my interview was supposed to take place. He had positioned himself as someone who was referred by me, mentioned specific details about their current projects that I had shared with him, and requested an immediate interview because he was considering multiple offers and needed to make a decision quickly. The hiring manager, impressed by Kyle's apparent insider knowledge and his urgency, had agreed to see him immediately. Kyle's interview had gone so well that they offered him the position on the spot without waiting to complete the process with other candidates. They hired him immediately, and my interview was canceled because the position was no longer available. This pattern continued for 5 more years, each incident more devastating than the last. Every time I found an opportunity that excited me, every time I worked toward a specific goal, Kyle would somehow find a way to insert himself into the process and walk away with what I had been building toward. At 24, it was a position at a consulting firm in Seattle where I had been networking for months. I had spent considerable time and money attending industry conferences in the Pacific Northwest, building relationships with key employees, and positioning myself as a strong candidate for their upcoming expansion. Kyle flew out there for a weekend trip just days before my final interview and happened to run into several key employees at the bars I had mentioned frequenting during my research phase. He used the connections I had spent months cultivating, referenced conversations I had shared with him about the company's strategic direction, and presented himself as someone who had been following the company's growth with great interest. By Monday morning, he had 3 job interviews lined up, including the position I had been pursuing. At 25, it was a marketing director role at a nonprofit in Portland focused on environmental conservation. I had volunteered with similar organizations for years to build relevant experience, had completed several pro bono projects to demonstrate my commitment to their cause, and had spent 8 months developing a relationship with their leadership team. Kyle spent 2 weeks intensively researching the nonprofit sector, reading every article and report I had shared with him over the years about environmental marketing strategies. He then reached out to the organization with a comprehensive proposal for restructuring their entire communication strategy, incorporating ideas and insights that I had developed through my volunteer work and had discussed with him during family dinners. His proposal was so polished and well-informed that they invited him for an interview immediately. During the interview, he presented a 5-year strategic plan that was based entirely on research and analysis I had done, packaged with his natural presentation skills and charisma. They offered him the director position with a salary significantly higher than what they had initially discussed with me. At 26, it was a business development role at a startup founded by one of my former professors, Dr. Sarah Chen. I had maintained that relationship for 3 years after graduation, regularly checking in, sharing industry insights, and looking for opportunities to add value to her growing company. Dr. Chen had specifically mentioned that when they were ready to hire their first business development professional, she would want to consider me for the role because of my understanding of their technology and my proven track record of maintaining professional relationships. Kyle reached out to Dr. Chen directly, mentioning that he was my brother and had been following the company's progress through my updates. He positioned himself as having insider knowledge about the industry trends and market opportunities that he'd gained through my research and analysis. He presented himself as someone who shared my analytical skills, but brought additional creative and interpersonal strengths to the table. Dr. Chen, impressed by Kyle's apparent familiarity with their business and his confident presentation, invited him for an interview. During the meeting, Kyle demonstrated comprehensive knowledge of their target market, their competitive landscape, and their potential growth strategies, all insights he had gained from 3 years of listening to my conversations about the company. He was offered the position the next day, with Dr. Chen commenting that while she had planned to consider me for the role, Kyle had shown exceptional initiative in reaching out and had presented ideas that were more advanced than what she had expected for someone without direct experience in their industry. The most devastating loss came when I was 27. After years of having my opportunities stolen, I had decided to take a different approach. I had been working as a freelance consultant for a year, building my own client base and developing a reputation in digital marketing. I thought that by creating my own business relationships, I could finally protect myself from Kyle's interference. A major client, a regional restaurant chain called Rocky Mountain Dining Group, had approached me about creating an internal marketing director position specifically for me. We had worked together for 8 months, and they were thrilled with the results I had delivered. I had helped them increase their social media engagement by 340%, developed a customer loyalty program that had boosted repeat visits by 25%, and created a digital advertising strategy that had generated their highest quarterly revenue in company history. The restaurant chain CEO, Michael Rodriguez, had told me directly that he wanted to bring me on full time because he had never worked with someone who understood their brand and their customers so thoroughly. We had spent weeks discussing the scope of the role, the salary expectations, and my vision for expanding their marketing efforts across all their locations. During the negotiation phase, I was so excited about finally having job security and a role that had been created around my specific strengths that I couldn't help sharing the good news with my family. I talked about the company's expansion plans, their commitment to investing in marketing, and how this opportunity represented everything I had been working toward in my career. Kyle expressed genuine happiness for me, asked thoughtful questions about the company's business model, and even offered to help me celebrate by taking the leadership team out for drinks once I officially started. He seemed proud of my success and supportive of this new chapter in my career. A week before my start date, the company called to inform me that they had decided to go with a different candidate, someone who had reached out to them with a more comprehensive vision for their marketing strategy and had presented ideas that built upon the work I had been doing, but took it to the next level. That candidate was Kyle. Over the following days, I pieced together what had happened. Kyle had used the 8 months of work I had done with the client as a foundation for his own pitch. He understood their business model, their challenges, their customer demographics, and their growth goals, because I had spent countless hours analyzing and discussing these elements with him at family dinners over the past year. He had approached Michael Rodriguez directly, introducing himself as a marketing strategist who had been following the company's growth and had developed some innovative ideas for their expansion. He presented a comprehensive strategy that was essentially an evolved version of everything I had implemented, but packaged with his natural charisma and enhanced with additional elements that showed creative thinking beyond my original work. Kyle had spent 2 weeks developing this presentation, incorporating not just the strategies I had already implemented, but extending them with ideas for regional expansion, franchise marketing support, and corporate partnership opportunities that I had mentioned as potential future projects. The restaurant chain was so impressed with his presentation that they offered him a salary 30% higher than what they had discussed with me, along with profit-sharing opportunities and a budget for a marketing team that he would hire and lead. When I confronted Kyle about this betrayal, his response was more calculated than ever. Business is competitive, Marcus. If you can't handle the competition, maybe you should consider a different career path. Besides, I improved on your ideas. The client got a better outcome because of me. He continued with a cold confidence that chilled me. You did good foundational work, but you lack vision. You think small. I took what you started and showed them what it could really become. That's leadership, Marcus. That's what separates people who execute from people who innovate. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally admitted something I had been avoiding for years. I didn't just resent my brother. I hated him. It wasn't sibling rivalry or professional jealousy. It was pure, crystalline hatred for someone who had spent years systematically destroying my ability to build a career, to trust my own capabilities, to believe that hard work and preparation could lead to success. But more than that, I realized that Kyle had turned my own family into accomplices in my professional destruction. Every family dinner where I shared my excitement about new opportunities became reconnaissance missions for his next sabotage. Every celebration of my achievements became intelligence gathering for his competitive advantage. For the first time, I began to consider what might happen if, instead of trying to protect my opportunities from Kyle, I actually found him one that would teach him a lesson he'd never forget. The idea came to me during one of those sleepless nights that followed losing the marketing director position. I was lying in bed, mentally reviewing all the jobs Kyle had stolen from me, when a question formed in my mind. What if I stopped trying to hide opportunities from him and instead presented him with one that seemed perfect but would ultimately destroy him? At my current consulting job, I had access to various industry databases and professional networks. Part of my work involved conducting due diligence research on potential clients and business partners, which gave me access to comprehensive background information on companies across multiple industries. I began researching companies with histories of internal problems, toxic workplace cultures, legal issues, financial instability, anything that would indicate a place where even Kyle's charisma couldn't save him from disaster. I spent weeks diving deep into court records, Better Business Bureau complaints, former employee reviews on sites like Glassdoor, and industry publications that covered corporate scandals. After 3 weeks of careful investigation, I found the perfect setup. Pinnacle Digital Solutions, a mid-sized marketing agency in Phoenix with an impressive facade that concealed serious underlying problems. From the outside, Pinnacle looked like exactly the kind of place Kyle would love. They had a sleek website showcasing award-winning campaigns, an office in a trendy part of Phoenix with modern amenities and an open concept design, and a client roster that included several recognizable national brands. Their social media presence showed a young, energetic team that seemed to embody the kind of creative workplace culture Kyle always gravitated toward. Their marketing materials emphasized rapid career advancement, creative freedom, and a disruptive approach to digital marketing that appealed to ambitious young professionals looking to make their mark in the industry. But my research revealed a dramatically different story. The company was facing multiple lawsuits from former employees alleging wage theft, unpaid overtime, and workplace harassment. They had a pattern of hiring ambitious young professionals with promises of rapid advancement, then working them 70 to 80 hours per week while classifying them as contractors to avoid providing benefits or overtime pay. Their employee turnover rate was over 200% annually, which meant they were constantly hiring new people to replace those who had burned out or quit in frustration. Current and former employees had filed complaints with the Arizona Department of Labor alleging systematic violations of wage and hour laws. Most importantly, they were on the verge of losing their 3 largest clients due to consistently missed deadlines, subpar work quality, and communication failures. The company was essentially a sinking ship with about 6 months before complete collapse, but they were still actively hiring to try to manage their workload crisis. The CEO, Richard Blackstone, was exactly the type of narcissistic leader who would initially love Kyle's enthusiasm and ambition, then turn him into a scapegoat when things went wrong. Based on the lawsuits and employee testimonials I'd found, Blackstone had a clear pattern of promoting young employees quickly, loading them with impossible responsibilities, then firing them and blaming them for any failures that occurred. Richard had been through 3 marketing directors in the past 18 months. Each had been hired with great fanfare, given ambitious targets and insufficient resources, then terminated when they inevitably failed to meet unrealistic expectations. The most recent director had lasted only 4 months before being fired and subsequently sued for breach of contract. It was perfect. The next step was presenting this opportunity to Kyle in a way that would make him desperate to pursue it. This required careful manipulation of information and timing, presenting only the positive aspects of Pinnacle while concealing the red flags that my research had revealed. During a family dinner in late September, I began laying the groundwork. I casually mentioned that I had been approached by a headhunter about an amazing opportunity in Phoenix, but that I was hesitant to relocate. I described Pinnacle Digital Solutions in glowing terms: their impressive client list, their reputation for innovative campaigns, their track record of rapid employee advancement. The headhunter said they're specifically looking for someone with my background, I said, carefully crafting the narrative. Apparently, they're in an aggressive expansion phase and need senior-level marketing strategists who can hit the ground running. The salary range is incredible, significantly higher than anything I've seen in Denver. It sounds like an incredible opportunity, Kyle said, immediately interested. What's holding you back? Honestly, I'm comfortable with my current consulting setup, I lied. Plus, Phoenix in the summer doesn't appeal to me. The heat is brutal, and I've built such strong client relationships here in Denver. But it's exactly the kind of place where someone with your skills could really make an impact. I spent the following weeks carefully feeding Kyle information about Pinnacle. I mentioned their recent expansion phase and how they were looking for exceptional talent to join their leadership team. I shared articles about their client wins, carefully selected from their most positive press coverage and omitting any mention of the problems I had discovered. I talked about their cutting-edge company culture, their focus on work-life balance, and their reputation as one of Phoenix's fastest-growing agencies. I made sure to mention specific details that would appeal to Kyle's ego, their emphasis on creative freedom, their preference for hiring visionary professionals, and their track record of promoting people quickly based on performance. Kyle's interest grew with each conversation. He began researching the company independently, but his research only turned up the positive information that Pinnacle wanted people to see. Their carefully crafted public image was designed to attract exactly the type of ambitious young professional that Kyle represented. The company had invested heavily in creating a polished external presentation. Their website featured glossy case studies. Their social media showed happy employees in a beautiful office environment, and their press releases emphasized growth, innovation, and success. All of this information was technically accurate, but it represented only a small fraction of the complete picture. After 2 weeks of building his enthusiasm, I delivered the final piece of the trap. Actually, I might know someone who could get you an interview there. I met Richard Blackstone at a conference last year, and we've stayed in touch. He's always looking for exceptional talent, and he specifically mentioned that he values referrals from people in the industry. If you're seriously interested, I could reach out to him. Kyle's response was immediate and enthusiastic. That would be amazing, Marcus. I've been looking for an opportunity to really make a mark in the industry, and Pinnacle seems like exactly the right place. Everything you've told me about their culture and growth trajectory sounds perfect for what I want to do next in my career. I waited 3 days before telling Kyle that Richard had responded positively to my inquiry and wanted to schedule a phone interview. In reality, I had created a fake email account that appeared to be from Richard Blackstone and sent myself a message that I could show Kyle as proof of Richard's interest. The fake email was carefully crafted to sound professional and enthusiastic. Thanks for reaching out about your brother Kyle. Based on what you've told me about his background and experience, he sounds like exactly the kind of dynamic professional we're looking for. I'd love to set up a call to discuss opportunities. We're moving fast on our hiring right now, so the sooner the better. The actual process of getting Kyle hired at Pinnacle was surprisingly simple. I researched Richard Blackstone's background and communication style through previous interviews, social media posts, and professional profiles. Then I crafted an email introducing Kyle that hit all the right notes, emphasizing his natural leadership abilities, his track record of delivering results under pressure, and his eagerness to contribute to a growing company. I sent this email from my genuine professional account, positioning it as a referral for my brother who was looking for a new challenge in a more dynamic environment. I made sure to highlight Kyle's strengths while subtly suggesting that he was the kind of ambitious professional who thrived in fast-paced, high-pressure environments. Within 48 hours, Richard had responded with enthusiasm and scheduled a video interview with Kyle. The response was exactly what I had expected based on my research into Richard's hiring patterns. He moved quickly when he found candidates who seemed to match his ideal profile, and Kyle's background and presentation perfectly fit what Richard was looking for. The interview went exactly as I had predicted. Kyle was charming, confident, and articulate. He had spent weeks researching Pinnacle's public-facing information and had prepared thoughtful questions about their growth strategy, company culture, and client relationships. He presented himself as someone who was excited about the opportunity to contribute to a dynamic, growing agency. Richard was clearly impressed by Kyle's energy, professionalism, and apparent passion for the industry. Kyle's natural charisma came through even over video, and his questions demonstrated both intelligence and genuine interest in the company's success. During the interview, Kyle showcased exactly the kind of confident ambition that Richard looked for in new hires. He talked about his vision for innovative marketing strategies, his experience managing complex client relationships, and his ability to thrive in challenging environments. Everything about his presentation suggested that he would be exactly the kind of high-performing employee that Pinnacle needed. Within a week, Kyle had been offered a position as senior marketing strategist with a starting salary of $85,000 and promises of rapid advancement for high performers. The offer included stock options, a comprehensive benefits package, and the possibility of promotion to director level within the first year based on performance. It was exactly the kind of offer that would make Kyle believe he had finally found his big break, a role that recognized his talents, rewarded his ambitions, and positioned him for significant career growth. Kyle accepted the offer immediately and gave his current employer 2 weeks' notice. He was thrilled about the opportunity, talking constantly about how this position would launch him into the executive level he had always believed he deserved. Kyle moved to Phoenix in November, excited about his new role and confident that this position would be the breakthrough that established him as a major player in the marketing industry. He rented an expensive apartment in Scottsdale, bought a new wardrobe appropriate for his executive track position, and spent his first week posting social media updates about his exciting new career opportunity. He talked about how Pinnacle represented everything he had been looking for in a career move: a dynamic company with growth potential, a leadership team that valued innovation, and a culture that rewarded performance and creativity. The reality of Pinnacle Digital Solutions revealed itself quickly, and it was everything I had expected based on my research. Kyle's first week involved 12-hour days trying to catch up on projects that were already months behind deadline. His senior marketing strategist role turned out to involve doing the work of 3 different positions that had recently been vacated by employees who quit without notice. The comprehensive benefits package he had been promised turned out to be minimal health insurance with high deductibles, and the stock options were essentially worthless given the company's financial situation. The collaborative team environment Richard had described during the interview consisted of a handful of overworked employees who were too stressed and exhausted to provide any meaningful support or mentorship. By his second week, Kyle was working 70-hour weeks and sleeping in the office several nights. The work-life balance that had been emphasized during his recruitment was non-existent. Richard expected immediate results on impossible timelines, and any questions about workload or resources were met with lectures about commitment and dedication to excellence. Kyle's first major project was salvaging a campaign for one of their biggest clients, a regional automotive dealership that was threatening to terminate their contract due to missed deadlines and poor communication. Kyle was given 3 days to produce a comprehensive marketing strategy that should have taken weeks to properly develop and implement. The previous marketing director had left the project in chaos, with conflicting messaging, unfinished creative assets, and no clear strategy for execution. Kyle was expected to not only complete the work, but to somehow transform it into something that would satisfy an increasingly frustrated client. Working around the clock, Kyle managed to deliver a presentation that temporarily satisfied the client and prevented the contract termination. Richard praised his dedication and hinted at a possible promotion, which motivated Kyle to continue accepting impossible deadlines and excessive workloads. For 3 months, Kyle maintained this unsustainable pace. He was constantly stressed, had no social life, and was burning through his savings to maintain his expensive lifestyle, while working essentially as a contractor, despite his employment classification. But he believed that his hard work was building towards something significant, that the promises of advancement and recognition would eventually materialize. Richard was masterful at keeping Kyle motivated despite the increasingly obvious problems at the company. He would provide just enough positive feedback and hints about future opportunities to keep Kyle believing that his sacrifices were worthwhile. Kyle was convinced that he was proving himself as indispensable and that his efforts would soon be rewarded with the promotion and recognition he deserved. The breaking point came in February, when everything I had predicted about Pinnacle's trajectory finally materialized. Pinnacle lost 2 of their major clients in the same week due to campaigns that had failed to deliver promised results. The automotive dealership that Kyle had worked so hard to save ultimately terminated their contract anyway, citing ongoing communication problems and substandard work quality. A second major client, a regional restaurant chain, pulled their account after a social media campaign generated negative publicity instead of the brand awareness they had paid for. Richard, facing potential bankruptcy and the collapse of his company, needed someone to blame for the failures. Kyle, as the most recent hire and the person who had worked most closely on both failed campaigns, became the obvious scapegoat. On a Tuesday morning in late February, Kyle was called into Richard's office and accused of mismanaging client relationships and delivering substandard work. Richard presented him with documentation suggesting that Kyle had made promises to clients that exceeded what Pinnacle could deliver, and that his strategies had been fundamentally flawed from the beginning. The documentation was carefully constructed to shift blame away from the company's systematic problems and onto Kyle's individual performance. Richard accused Kyle of being in over his head, of lacking the experience necessary for senior-level responsibilities, and of damaging client relationships through poor communication and unrealistic expectations. Kyle was terminated immediately and escorted from the building by security. He was given no severance pay, and Richard made it clear that any requests for references would be met with honest assessments of Kyle's performance issues and inability to meet professional standards. But Kyle's problems were just beginning. 2 weeks after his termination, Kyle received a call from a lawyer representing 3 former Pinnacle employees who were filing a class action lawsuit against the company. They had identified Kyle as someone who had worked closely with Richard during the period when most of the alleged wage theft and workplace violations had occurred. The lawyer explained that Kyle's name appeared on several internal documents related to contractor misclassification and overtime violations. While he wasn't necessarily a target of the lawsuit, he might be called as a witness, and his professional association with Pinnacle during this period could damage his reputation in the industry. The legal situation was complicated by the fact that Kyle had been involved, however unwillingly, in some of the practices that were now being challenged in court. He had worked the excessive hours without proper compensation, had been misclassified as exempt from overtime despite not meeting the legal requirements, and had participated in client meetings where unrealistic promises had been made. Kyle tried to find new employment, but the marketing industry in Phoenix was smaller and more interconnected than he had realized. Word had already spread about Pinnacle's problems, and several potential employers had heard about the company's legal issues and were hesitant to hire anyone associated with Richard Blackstone's operation. The few interviews Kyle did manage to secure were uncomfortable experiences where he found himself having to explain and defend his association with a company that was becoming notorious in the local business community. His resume, which had looked impressive when he first moved to Phoenix, was now viewed with suspicion and skepticism. By March, Kyle had burned through his savings and was unable to make rent on his expensive Scottsdale apartment. The lifestyle he had established based on his expected income and rapid career advancement was no longer sustainable. He had no choice but to break his lease, accept the financial penalties, and move back to Denver to stay with our parents while searching for work. The Kyle who returned home was fundamentally different from the confident, ambitious person who had left 5 months earlier. The constant stress and overwork had taken a visible physical toll. He had lost significant weight, developed chronic insomnia, and showed signs of anxiety and depression that he had never experienced before. But more significantly, his professional confidence was completely shattered. For the first time in his life, Kyle had encountered a situation where his natural charisma and communication skills weren't enough to guarantee success. He had worked harder than ever before, sacrificed more than he had ever been asked to sacrifice, and still been made a scapegoat for problems that were far beyond his control. During family dinners, Kyle was subdued and uncertain. He talked about feeling like he had lost his instinct for reading people and situations. The brother who had once stolen opportunities with casual confidence now second-guessed every professional interaction and questioned his own judgment about career decisions. Our parents, who had always celebrated Kyle's natural abilities and easy success, didn't know how to respond to this version of their golden child. They tried to be supportive, but their encouragement felt hollow because it was based on a version of Kyle that no longer existed. As for me, watching Kyle's transformation brought unexpected and complex emotions. Initially, I felt the dark satisfaction I had anticipated. Finally, my brother was experiencing the professional devastation and self-doubt that he had caused me to feel for years. There was a part of me that delighted in seeing Kyle struggle to find work, watching him question his own abilities, seeing him experience the kind of professional rejection and uncertainty that had become routine in my own career because of his sabotage. But as weeks turned into months, satisfaction gave way to something more complicated. Kyle was genuinely struggling, not just professionally, but emotionally and psychologically. The experience at Pinnacle had broken something in him that went far beyond just career setbacks. I watched my brother, who had always been confident to the point of arrogance, become hesitant and self-doubting. He started therapy, something he had always dismissed as unnecessary for people who were naturally resilient. He talked about feeling like he didn't understand people anymore, like he had lost the ability to assess situations and relationships that had always come naturally to him. I began to question whether my revenge had gone too far. Kyle had certainly deserved consequences for his years of sabotaging my opportunities, but I had deliberately guided him into a situation that I knew would be professionally and personally destructive. I had used my knowledge and resources to orchestrate his downfall in ways that were far more calculated and harmful than anything he had done to me. In May, I started therapy with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a counselor who specialized in family dynamics and workplace trauma. I needed help processing both my years of resentment toward Kyle and my growing guilt about orchestrating his downfall. You both grew up in a family system that rewarded competition and comparison, Dr. Walsh explained during one of our early sessions. Kyle learned that taking what others had worked for was acceptable behavior, while you learned that you had to be perfect to deserve recognition. Neither of those lessons created healthy relationship patterns. Through therapy, I began to understand that my revenge, while emotionally satisfying in the short term, had perpetuated the same cycle of manipulation and harm that Kyle had used against me for years. I had become the predator in our dynamic, using my knowledge and resources to deliberately damage my brother's life and career. The breakthrough came during a session in July when Dr. Walsh asked me a question that forced me to confront the real impact of my actions. If Kyle had done to you what you did to him, deliberately guiding you into a situation he knew would destroy your career and mental health. How would you feel about him? The answer was obvious and immediate. I would never forgive him. I would see him as someone who had crossed a line from sibling rivalry into genuine cruelty. I would view him as someone who had used intimate family knowledge to deliberately destroy my life, and that betrayal would be unforgivable. That realization forced me to acknowledge that my revenge had achieved its goal, but at a cost that went far beyond what Kyle deserved for his past behavior. I had broken him in ways that might never fully heal, and that responsibility weighed on me more heavily than the satisfaction I had initially felt. In August, after weeks of internal debate and preparation, I made the decision to tell Kyle the truth about Pinnacle Digital Solutions. I asked him to meet me for coffee at a neutral location, away from family and familiar environments where our old dynamics might reassert themselves. Kyle looked older than his 26 years, with the kind of deep exhaustion that comes from months of stress, uncertainty, and self-doubt. "I have something I need to tell you," I began, "and I need you to hear me out completely before you respond." I explained everything: how I had researched companies with toxic cultures specifically to find one that would harm him, how I had identified Pinnacle as a perfect trap, how I had manipulated the introduction and recommendation process to get him hired there. I told him about my years of resentment over the jobs he had taken from me, and how that resentment had led me to orchestrate his professional downfall. Kyle's response progressed through several stages. Initially, there was disbelief. He couldn't accept that I'd been capable of such calculated manipulation. Then came anger, both at me for what I had done and at himself for not seeing the trap. Finally, there was something that looked almost like relief. "I knew something felt wrong about that whole situation," he said quietly. "Richard was too eager to hire me. The work environment was worse than anywhere I'd ever been, and the timeline of everything falling apart felt too convenient. But I couldn't figure out what I was missing. I kept thinking I was being paranoid, or that I was losing my ability to read situations correctly." He was quiet for several minutes before continuing. "I deserve this, don't I? For all the jobs I took from you over the years, this is what karma looks like." "Maybe," I said, "but that doesn't make what I did right. I deliberately guided you into a situation that I knew would be destructive, and I underestimated how much damage it would actually cause to you as a person, not just your career." We talked for over 4 hours that afternoon. Kyle acknowledged for the first time the pattern of behavior that had characterized our relationship for years. His casual appropriation of opportunities I had worked toward, his dismissive attitude when confronted, his assumption that his natural advantages made him entitled to whatever he wanted. For the first time, he seemed to understand the cumulative impact of his actions on my career and self-confidence. "I never thought about it from your perspective," he admitted. "I saw each situation as separate, just me being better in that moment. I didn't realize I was systematically destroying your ability to trust that hard work would pay off." I explained how his pattern of sabotage had affected not just individual job opportunities, but my entire approach to career development. How I had started hiding my professional goals, avoiding family discussions about work, and developing a paranoid approach to networking because I never knew when he might use information against me. "I turned into someone who couldn't trust his own family," I said. "And that's not entirely your fault. Our parents enabled this dynamic by never holding you accountable. But you chose to keep taking advantage of the situation even when you could see how it was affecting me." Kyle nodded, accepting responsibility in a way he never had before. "The worst part is that I was good enough to get those jobs on my own merits. I didn't need to sabotage you to succeed. I did it because it was easier and because I could get away with it." Our conversation ended with a mutual agreement that our relationship needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. Kyle would take responsibility for finding his own career opportunities without any involvement from family connections or information. I would work on processing my resentment through therapy rather than through manipulation and revenge. 3 months later, Kyle found a job at a small marketing agency in Fort Collins. It was a significant step down from the positions he had held before, both in terms of salary and prestige, but it was honest work with a company that had a reputation for treating employees well and maintaining realistic expectations. He specifically chose a company where no family connections could influence the hiring process, and he was completely transparent about his experience at Pinnacle during the interview process. The hiring manager at the Fort Collins agency had heard about Pinnacle's problems and was sympathetic to Kyle's situation, recognizing that he had been caught up in a company's systematic dysfunction rather than being the cause of it. The Kyle who emerged from this experience was more humble, more aware of how his actions affected others, and more willing to work for what he achieved rather than taking shortcuts at other people's expense. He approached his new job with a level of caution and self-reflection that he had never shown before. Our relationship today is cautious, but steadily improving. We have coffee once a month and talk about work in general terms, but we maintain clear boundaries about sharing specific professional information. Kyle has never asked me for referrals or networking connections, and I've never offered them. Our parents eventually recognized that their pattern of comparing us and excusing Kyle's behavior had contributed to years of family dysfunction. They started family therapy in the fall, and for the first time since we were children, family gatherings don't involve competition or comparison. I learned through this experience that revenge, even when it feels justified, rarely provides the satisfaction or closure we expect. Breaking Kyle's confidence and professional momentum felt powerful in the moment, but it didn't heal the years of damage his behavior had caused to my career and self-esteem. Real healing came through therapy, honest communication, and the gradual rebuilding of trust and respect between us. Kyle and I will never have the close relationship that some siblings enjoy, but we found a way to coexist without the toxic dynamic that defined our 20s. The cycle is broken, not through destruction, but through accountability, consequences, and the difficult work of changing patterns that had defined our family for years. Sometimes the most effective revenge is simply refusing to participate in destructive dynamics, setting boundaries, and building a life where other people's manipulation can't reach you. Kyle and I still exchange holiday cards and attend family gatherings, but we've learned to see each other as separate people with independent goals rather than competitors for limited resources. It took nearly destroying both of our careers to reach this point, but we're both better people for having gone through it. The most important lesson I learned is that breaking a cycle of harm doesn't require perpetuating that harm in the opposite direction. It requires stepping away from the cycle entirely and choosing a different way to engage with the people who have hurt us. Today, both Kyle and I are building careers based on our own merits, our own networks, and our own professional reputations. It's slower and requires more effort than the shortcuts we both relied on in the past, but it's sustainable and honest. Neither of us will ever again have to wonder whether our success came at someone else's expense or whether the next phone call might bring news that our professional life was about to be upended by family drama. That peace of mind, it turns out, is worth more than any individual job opportunity either of us ever fought over.